This podcast is not safe for work and will feature movie spoilers. It will feature scenes described of a graphic nature. It will contain language which most listeners may find offensive. Welcome to the podcast Under the Stairs. Hi everyone and welcome to the podcast Under the Stairs. I am your host Duncan. Welcome to the show. Up on this episode, we are concluding, I know, sad face. Let's throw up a sad emoji for some fallen peeps and pour out a 40, although I don't know what that means. It's because there's Americans on the show. My dialect's changing slightly. You can hear it in my tone. I sound authentically American right now. This is the finale, the last episode in Volume 1 of our horror head-to-head, a series that was birthed out of the maddening, slowly declining brain of me, alcohol-ailed, and just in general, a guy that likes spreadsheets, has too much time on his hands, and thinks on paper that these sound like great ideas until you start doing them. However, I will say on the flip side of this one, this is a series that I have genuinely enjoyed doing, and we are doing another one. In fact, we're doing 4 in the first run, and the draw has already been, by the time this is dropped, the draw for the next series is already dropped, and a whole new lot of directors, a whole new lot of hosts. But will they be as good as these ones? I think not. I'm going to put that out there right now. Shots are being fired. The simple premise in this one is we have 4 films, 4 hosts. The hosts may or may not like these movies. We will find when we get to them. But if you imagine me being like the Judge Judy of Judge Judy, that I'm sure you guys have watched Judge Judy at one time or another. That's how far your culture has infiltrated mine. I know who Judge Judy is. I'm like the Judge Judy here, except with instead of 2 people arguing out, there's 4. Maybe they're getting on, maybe they're not. We'll find out. But they're going to bring their best case for or against their movie. And these are 4 directors on this episode that are in their field of horror classed as top tier. And we'll see if the movies that these hosts got are top tier as well. The simple goal of this is to score the movies out of 5 categories: story, acting, effects, soundtrack, and kills. And at the end of this, we will have a first place, second place, third place, and fourth place for these movies. It may surprise you because these are technical grades. Lastly, if any of the movies are joint place, we will bring in my scores, which you'll find out anyway, but that's when they will have an effect on the episode. Joining me on this episode, 4 long, tall glasses of fuck. That's what they are, all 4 of them. I'm going to introduce them in the order that they will be defending on this episode tonight. So, the first gentleman I want to introduce here, and I instantly, as soon as I started thinking about that introduction, got right into the I will pronounce his surname wrong. So I'm going to stop myself from pronouncing his surname wrong because there's an Asian film on this list, and I'll be doing plenty of that later. Is our good buddy Dan. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am all the better for having you on another episode.
Yeah, fun to be back.
Back to back. You are on this episode representing Mike Flanagan with a little movie called Dr. Sleep that isn't related to any movie that is beholden to the horror community or an adaptation of a novel by any famous horror author. So I need to ask, a bit of a Stephen King head, yes or no?
Oh yeah.
Alright, that's alright then. There are horror fans that like, no, those books put me to sleep and I can't finish one without an alien appearing. And I get that. There's a lot of them wearing aliens. And we're like, yeah, that's how you finish a book, Stephen. I'm curious to see I know what your scores are, but I'm curious to see how you justify said scores when we get to them. Not that I'm giving anything away, but we will be getting to you at the front of the episode. So get yourself ready. Get yourself in the old reviewing position, and I look forward to hearing your case momentarily. I'm going to swing right round to, you just heard him with Dan on the previous episode. They're back again because they love it so much and they will never leave now. Representing Deadly Friend for Wes Craven. I know what you're thinking out there. Is that the Wes Craven movie we got? Yes. Neither one were top tier, but there may be something in this one. We'll find out when we get to it. Is my good buddy Cole. How you doing, Cole?
What's up, buddy? Honored to be a part of this love sandwich, especially in the middle. So, I'm all good with that. Forgot my nipple tassels. I can run inside and grab them real quick. I know you spent a lot of money shipping those over here for me. So,
yes,
but
they do.
Hello again,
when
Dan.
You're swinging them. When you are swinging them. One says Duncan, and the other one says.
I'll just do like one little flex and get one of them going. Hello to the host. David, Michigan, Mr. Yeah, we got the Midwest represented here, so I'm pretty proud of that. 3-2, and then JP first time, so I'm gonna pop that cherry real hard.
Yo.
Oh, I did not know that. The more you know on these, I bring podcasters together. That's what I do. I'm like a really poor dating service. You know what I mean? That's my whole want in life. We're going to get to you momentarily, Cole, with your review. But we're going to continue on with the cherries that have been put. I don't know. The analogies are all wrong. And I'm feeling a wee bit icky. This guy here will be representing Park Chan-Wook. And his vampire movie, Thirst, is, of course, my good buddy GP. How you doing, GP?
Yo, I'm here, back again. I was on episode 1, and the curtain raiser and the curtain closer.
I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way, buddy. You know what I mean? Like you set the tone and the tempo, and you're here to close it out smoothly. So, what movie did you have in episode 1? I'm trying to remember now.
Rec 4.
You had Rec 4. That's right. I'm just going to say, and I don't want to give anything away, I would like to think you landed with a better movie at the end.
Yeah, probably.
Maybe makes up for it, just a smidge. Looking forward to getting to your review. And then last, joining us here is, I mean, he's already been here as well on this run of shows here. Once again, I think he's maybe, I don't know if you're pulling better than you did last time or what's happening here, but you have It Stains the Sand Red. That is, of course, my good buddy David. How you doing, David?
I'm good, glad to be back and everything. And yeah, because I mean, Lord of Illusions was my first one, so I mean, kind of guess similar in like territory, I would say.
A lot of sand.
Yeah,
there's a lot of sand.
That's a lot of sand, movies. A lot of deserts over here.
I'm very, 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 very interested to see where we land on that, because that of the kind of Vicious Brothers movies was the one where I'd seen it before, but I genuinely forgot it was part of their back catalogue. So we're going to do the rims because I did neglect to ask what shows you're representing, so we'll do it in reverse order this time and make our way back to Dan. David, what show are you representing on here?
Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast, and any of the other kind of sub-shows we have will be all under that feed as well.
Thank you very much. JP, what show are you representing?
Primarily 22 shots of moods and horror. Been going over 10 years now. Got a ton of episodes. Started a new show recently called The Sin Bin, which is a monthly show, and we've been very consistent with it, where we review the latest Vinegar Syndrome titles that are released. So that's been going well too, and that's a video show if you want to check that out.
Perfect, thank you very much. Cole, what show are you representing?
The Joe Blow Horror Show. We are just, by the time you hear this, we'll be releasing our Summer of the Cenobite. So each summer we pick a franchise, and this one is Hellraiser. So stay tuned. You'll hear Mr. Duncan on one of those and a handful of other hosts that you're probably familiar with, all of them, I would imagine. So looking forward to that. Busy summer.
Yeah, I am like absolutely champing at the bit to get that recording done.
I've only seen the first two, and you keep telling me about Cenobite, or I forgot how you put it for your film.
Cowboy Cenobite Ninjas.
Yeah.
Part 5. Yeah. There's it's something to, but like when you give me the option of reviewing any of them. I mean, you want to talk about the classics, but then you're like, everyone wants to talk about the classics. This time I get to pick the guilty pleasures. So right in there, big sexy Craig Sheffer from Nightbreed, and just like for no reason, like Ninja Cowboy Cenobites.
I'm pumped. I'm pretty excited.
Can't go wrong from there. We'll keep our eyes peeled for that for sure. And lastly, Dan, what show are you representing?
Corrupted Youth Podcast. We're a father and son duo that covers the latest blockbusters, classic genre films, and the schlockiest of VHS rental store flicks in spoiler-heavy fashion.
Phenomenal. Well, now that we have that all the way, you know what I mean? Let's get into this, shall we? It's very, very simple. What we're going to do is give each of the hosts approximately 5 minutes to come up and put forward their case for or against the movie that they were selected. At the end of that, we will review their scores for the movie, and then they will be open up to cross-examination from the other hosts, who we will also get their counts and reviews as well. At the end of that round, we will have a full listing for who scored the movie the highest, who scored it the lowest, and what the overall score for the movies was. And then we'll move on to the next host, etc., etc. Now, first, bringing the thunder is our good buddy Dan here. He landed Mike Flanagan's Dr. Sleep from 2019. Let me give you a little bit of info on that movie before we get into his review. But yeah, this is directed by Mike Flanagan, based on the Stephen King novel of the same name, but essentially adapted for the screen by Mike Flanagan. The DP here is Michael Filmonari. That's not how you pronounce his name, but we're sticking with it. Who's done pretty much all of Flanagan's stuff since 2015's Before I Wake. The score here is done by the Newton brothers, who once again have done loads of Flanagan work. Pretty much every project since 2014's Oculus. The movie itself stars Ewan McGregor, Rebecca Ferguson, Kylie Curran, Cliff Curtis, Zan McLaren, Emily Aileen Lynn, Selena Andrews, we're losing it quick, Robert Longstreet, Carol Stricken, and Katie Parker. The synopsis for the movie is listed on IMDb as: years following the events of The Shining from 1980, a now adult Dan Torres must protect a young girl with similar powers from a cult known as the True Knot, who prey on children with powers to remain immortal. The trivia for this one that I pulled from the pages and pages of trivia are that Mike Flanagan painstakingly recreated the sets of the Overlook Hotel from blueprints acquired from the Stanley Kubrick estate. Mike Flanagan wrote the Overlook Hotel back into the story of Dr. Sleep, keeping its prosperity consistent with the cinematic universe of The Shining. And then lastly, the Rose travelling sequence was among Mike Flanagan's first storyboard sequences. Post was extended several months in order to get the visuals just right. With that being said, and all that information out there, the podcast Under the Stairs calls to the stand representing the movie for or against Dr. Sleep by Mike Flanagan. One Mr. Dan. Dan, if you'd like to come up here and put forward your case, please.
Hello, my fellow Horror Head-to-Head Volume 1, Episode 5 Roundtable members, and our gracious host, Duncan. I present to you my case in favor of Mike Flanagan's film, Dr. Sleep. But we have to begin by addressing the two critical circumstances involved with Dr. Sleep. I mean, first, it is an adaptation of the Stephen King novel, which is a sequel to his book, The Shining, but it's also a sequel to The Shining from Stanley Kubrick, which, I mean, it's easy to say it's a modern masterpiece of film. And, you know, I think a lot of people might have issues with, especially if you're big into Stephen King, that, hey, this is a lot different than the book in a lot of ways, but I think that it gets a pass because, after all, being a sequel to Kubrick's film, he left a lot of stuff out and changed things as well. So it's a sticky little area, but I'm just trying to look at it from how do I feel about this movie? And honestly, I mean, The Shining, not to keep talking about that, not talk about Dr. Sleep, but it was like I watched that movie when I was 5 years old, and not an appropriate time to watch it. And boy, it really stuck with me. So everything in this film that is referencing Kubrick's film is just, it like really kind of sticks with me. And I was a big fan of it. And I feel that if anybody's going to really lovingly handle anything Stephen King, especially, Mike Flanagan's your guy. I think that he's always just like knocked it out of the park each time, and you know, he takes a lot of care with it, and that's pretty interesting. As far as like the story goes and everything, it's a pretty cool story. It's a good like follow up to The Shining, and I mean, one thing though is like Rose the Hat, a great villain, because there's nothing more annoying than someone making a piece of their attire their entire personality. I mean, it doesn't really like come through like in the translation from like the book, but you know, it's just like, what is with this damn hat? You know, but no, I think it does a really good job. I don't really have a whole lot to say about it, which is weird considering how much I actually just love it. I mean, the film itself, it looks fantastic, and like the attic apartment is probably the most Mike Flanagan thing you'll ever see.
Yeah.
Like all the angles and everything and the lighting, it's just like, I don't know, it really sells it. But yeah, this movie, for as good as it looks, it makes it even look good. And the parts of the movie that are really gritty, and like the whole sequence with the baseball boy getting murdered by the cult it's a hard watch, and it just keeps going, and that kid surprisingly sells it too. And you know, if you're a parent, that might be a little difficult to watch. But yeah, I don't know, I'm all for it. I guess
you're all
I'm
for the
just gonna...
movie, not for the violence on the children. Just want to specify that there.
Maybe.
He is from Wisconsin.
No, I love I like it in movies when like there's child endangerment. It makes it feel a lot more
100%.
real.
Always, yeah. I'm 100% with you. Right, let's dig into some scores here from you. Like I said before, we have 5 categories: story, acting, effects, soundtrack, and kills. Dan, what did you give story?
I gave the story a 9. I mean, it's a adaptation from a novel, so it's probably, you know, it's tight.
Yep.
Even with like what they cut out, and it's still like a almost 3-hour movie.
Just over 2.5 hours in the theatrical cut, and then over 3 hours for the director's cut. So, what about acting? What did you give acting?
I gave the acting a 9.5, which that's pretty high. A 10's going to be tough to get, but I mean, when you got like good kid actors, that helps it. But everybody else is just knocking it out of the park in this.
Effects. What did you give the effects?
I gave the effects a 9 because I thought the effects were really good, especially when any of the, what would you call them, like energy vampires?
Yeah.
Or whatever. like when they're dying and it's like flipping through like them and their like entire physical structure, and you get those flashes. That's a really cool effect. The whole Rose the Hat flying through the sky bit is really cool.
Soundtrack?
I gave it a 9.
Yep.
It really just kind of like set the tone, and I mean, yeah, they're still like hitting those the Shining notes.
Yeah.
But it really works. It helps bridge a lot of the movie and makes it feel like, oh, okay, yeah, it gets you into it.
Nice. And then lastly, kills?
I gave it a 9. Like I said, with the effects of, you know, any of the vampires going through their whole process, but yeah, and unfortunately, poor Billy. that was a rough one too. But it probably could have been a little more graphic, I suppose. But
cool.
No,
right, let's go top to bottom on the scores then. So, out of a possible 50 points that you could have given Dr. Sleep, you gave it 45.5. It's pretty damn near the top. It's a very, very, very high score. We are going to find out if your co-hosts here Agree or disagree? Let's open it up to the floor here. We're going to keep you where you are, Dan, because you are about to be commented on, potentially. The first person that gets a crack at your review and a review of the movie themselves is Cole. Cole, what do you think? Is Dan on the level here? Is he just wildly off in other parts? What are you thinking, buddy?
Overall, I'm pretty much right in line with him for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
So, Flanagan, I dogged on him a little bit last episode, but he's literally him and his attention to detail make him the perfect director for this type of film. I just love the recreations, the callbacks. Now, I will say that The Shining, Kubrick's Shining, is my all-time favorite movie by a country mile. Everything about it is perfect, and I try, anything that even touches The Shining. How you get with your films that you hold near and dear to your heart. I was pretty nervous when this came out, but I kind of loved it. And to be honest, I've seen this now 4 times, and every time I've seen it, it's gotten better and better. So it just keeps kind of growing on me. The one thing I will say, and again, it's not really fair to this film to compare it to the original Shining, but tonally, I kind of wanted it to be on that same level. There were some spots, where it did, I would say, with Jacob Tremblay or Billy's death, kind of went a little bit up above and beyond what I was expecting. But tonally, I was a little bit wanting it to be heavier, if that makes sense. But I mean, it's a masterclass in filmmaking. The third act just ramps it up, the tension. It's phenomenal, and I absolutely loved going back to the Overlook and how good it looked. And it was, yeah. I love this film, so there's no hiding that.
Right. Well, let's see if that reflects in your scores then. What did you give story?
I gave the story a 10.
Boom.
Partly because anything that can follow The Shining and be this good, I mean, that's a hill to climb right there. So I felt that it exceeded expectations for myself and probably quite a few others.
Cool. Right. So that's one higher. It's maximum marks, basically one higher than what Dan gave it. What about the acting?
Acting is a 9. Ewan McGregor kind of surprised me a little bit. I'm not the biggest fan of his, but I'd be lying if when I heard he was going to be the lead in this, I was let down a little bit, but he was fantastic. Cliff Curtis, I mean, he's a gem as well too. So Rose the Hat, obviously. Oh gosh, that sweetest act. Rebecca Ferguson, she was awesome.
Awesome. Right. So you gave that a 9. So it's a 0.5 lower than Dan. Effects. What do you think?
Yeah, effects were a 9. Everything looked fantastic. There was a lot of CGI in this, and it looked great. Like Dan, Grandpa Flick or Fick or whatever, when he was cycling was excellent. I loved how that was done. So very well done.
That's spot on with what Dan gave it. Soundtrack.
9.5. Orchestral. Brought me back to Kubrick's The Shining. I thought it was a near perfect fit.
Perfect. So that's just a 0.5 above Dan. And then lastly, kills.
6.5. Maybe it's because I had his previous film stuck in my head, but it was too similar to that. And I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of kills anyways. The whole thing with Billy, I feel that it wasn't as much the kill, it was the idea and the brutality of it was a 10 out of 10, but you didn't really see much. The energy vampires, I almost started laughing when Dan said that because I kept thinking about the guy from What We Do in the Shadows. I just lost it. Energy vampire. But yeah, I mean, it was, just gray fog coming out of their mouth. So, I don't know, 6.5.
Right, let's see what that translates to overall scores. Out of a possible 50, you gave the movie 44, so that's a 1.5 lower than Dan, but fucking very respectable, if ever there was a score. So thank you very much, Cole. Let's swing around to JP. JP, anything that hasn't been mentioned yet that you want to lean in on, or anything you want to take umbrage with?
This Dr. Sleep, I saw it when it came out. It made my top 10 that year, but I haven't seen it since.
Hmm.
So I was very curious to see how it would hold up. I was pretty high on it when I had seen it the first time, and watching it again, I definitely think that it holds up very strong. For a film that is essentially, about vampires, it could easily go pretty generic. Like,
Mhm.
I remember when I first heard that it was gonna like these vampire that like basically like feeds on shine. I was like, I don't know about that, and I had never read the book. And I will say that the baseball kid kill is so brutal, and just it goes on forever. And I think that was actually one of the most important aspects of this movie for me, because it kind of went in a place where I didn't expect for a mainstream Hollywood film. And it made me feel like anything could happen after that, which is always a good thing. That's why I'm pro killing kids in film.
Movies. In movies. Right, thank you.
But I think that the villains are really good. I love how Mike Flanagan incorporated the Shining original film, because this is like such a weird thing, because it is a adaptation of a novel that is also a sequel to a film that strayed from the novel. So it's like a very interesting,
you know what I mean? Famously, as in contest.
Yes.
Like, Stephen King does not like The Shining. I don't know if you've heard that. I don't know if you've if at any point in the last 30 odd years he hates The Shining.
Yeah.
Primarily stylistic choices with the way the Jack Torrance character and the Wendy character are portrayed on screen, but moreover he does not like the ending of the movie, which is interesting because Dr. Sleep retrofits the ending of this movie to be the ending of the book, The Shining. So it's like Mike Flanagan for some reason is like the United Nations here, trying to do a peace treaty between a dead director and an author who is kind of like, I don't know, I'm going to keep kicking Kubrick even though he's dead.
You're 100% right. And imagine, and that's why I give Flanagan so much credit, because he bridged the gap between this thing that Stephen King didn't like and found this happy medium where it does take a lot from that film, but it also, I think it does it in a way that makes Stephen King happy. And just, I mean, dude, when I first saw the carpet, like, I'm just awesome. Like, wow, this is cool, man. And I'm not even the biggest fan of The Shining. Like, I'm probably one of the horror fans out there that doesn't hold it to the extent that other people do. Like, I'm kind of known for not loving it as much as other people, but I do think it's a great movie. It's just not my favorite.
I think as horror fans, we forget that a lot of, if you haven't read the book, most people, I would say, are not familiar with the miniseries, or, I mean, they just associate Kubrick's Shining to that's the way it is. So, I mean, I feel like you kind of had to blend them together because that's what the mainstream, that's what the people are going to be able to associate with it.
Yeah,
100%.
Right. Another thing that I absolutely loved is one of the most iconic scenes in The Shining is the woman in the bathtub, and they recreated that so well. And I gotta give props to bringing back these characters, like the Scatman Crothers character. He was really good. Felt very, very similar to the original.
Alex Esso as Wendy is scarily fucking accurate. Yeah. The only one I don't like, and I know people are going to be like, well, yeah, I kind of agree, is the portrayal of Jack Torrance.
It was a bit off. It was pretty close. Like, I give him props for getting the look pretty close.
Yeah.
But I agree that it didn't have... And can you really expect anybody...
Well, this is the problem here. It's like Jack Nicholson has one of the most identifiable faces in cinema. So it's always going to be difficult to do it. And
even the voice. Like, his voice is so iconic, especially in The Shining.
Yes.
Just the sort of, like, pissed off undertone to his voice throughout and sort of just like even at the very beginning of The Shining, he's already like cranky.
Yeah, this is why Stephen King doesn't like the movie. He's like,
I thought about that too. Why they chose to go with new actors versus the facial recognition in
I would
AI type
100%
stuff.
not have the facial recognition thing in it at all. I
Yeah.
probably just wouldn't have had that character there. I would have maybe had like the voice as like an echo of things he hears when he goes in certain rooms, as opposed to having the actual ghost of his dead dad in there, because it's so, like, to me it's so off-putting. But it's only a tiny segment, so I can be like that. It's just
Well,
this one
I
little
think
segment.
also too, to comment on that, is I understand why you have that scene, because it's such an important aspect
100%.
of the film.
Yeah.
But I actually feel like they didn't really do much with it. Like, I felt like you could have done a little bit more between that relationship that had been severed so many years ago, and
Yeah.
sort of like almost you could have played around with like sort of like a, you know, like this interaction between these two characters who haven't seen each other in so long, even though Danny was a kid. I feel like they didn't really capitalize on the idea that
I
much.
feel
But
like,
yeah,
too,
I
it
agree.
works-
That's probably my least favorite part of the film, is actually
Yeah.
that scene.
It works better though, because if you think about it, it's going off of his memories that he had when he was like 5 or 6 years old. So I mean,
Yeah.
it kind of makes sense that maybe the voices didn't work as well, or the faces. So
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
like I said, I don't. In principle, the messaging behind it, and all the rest, I like. It's just one of those things that, like, my brain instantly looks at him and says, "Not Jack." Whereas with everyone else in the movie, I'm like that. Yeah, that's very close to even the oh, great party and all these people. I'm looking at them going, that is that man still alive?
yeah,
Like they're all so scarily accurate. It's bizarre, or they're like so close an approximation. The thing about it is the Jack character. There's two shots that you get, so you get a kind of profile shot of him where it's almost passable. It's when you get the full facial shot
And
of
he's
him
wa-
at the
yeah,
very
he's
end of
doing
that
the
scene.
shuffle.
That's where it kind of. To me, that's where I'm like, all right, I'm taking it. But it's so small as a segment,
Yeah.
I can kind of let it go. Let's not spend too much time beating up on the poor
I'd
guy
like to
that's
add one
casted
more
Jack
thing
Torrance.
about this, though.
Yep.
Sorry. I know you're trying to move on, but
Generally, we don't allow this, Dan, but I will. It's the last episode. I feel like rules can be broken.
I would just like to point out, though, that with Stephen King,
Yep.
he does have his own multiverse. All his stuff is in a multiverse, and so I just used that as a hand wave, and I was just like, whatever. He's just slightly different.
Yeah. Multiverse Jack. I mean, they should have went, if they were going to try and make everything happy for absolutely everyone, they should have just got the guy that played Jack in the miniseries. Just flung him in there, just angered everyone.
Ah.
No one would be happy about that. Everyone would be fucking angry. It'd be the best thing ever. A Flanagan, he's pulled a Flanagan again. I mean, everyone, it doesn't make anyone angry. I'd like, similar to what GP said, and we're going to get to your scores in a tiny wee second here. I am maybe not as stoked as the horror community is as a whole that Mike Flanagan is doing the new Exorcist movie, because I still feel that guy, as a great director, is really walking into a Kirsten Doom project, right? And I'm just like, of that. But similar to GP, I hadn't really revisited this movie since it came out in the cinema, and I remember feeling kind of similar when Doctor Sleep was announced and being like that. Well, that's a needless movie. Like, let's just leave it as a book. And then we're like, oh, Mike Flanagan's doing it. I'm like, I'm usually on board with you, Mike, but that feels like a misstep. And then, well, I got to the end of, this will be the third time I've seen it now. Second time watching the theatrical cut. And I got to the end of it, and it doesn't really, out with like one or two tiny things, which will be reflected when you my scores at the end, I don't really put that much of a foot wrong. It kind of really established that Flanagan as a director can handle a massive budget. So, which we will see how he does with The Exorcist. I'm fucking why he's decided to do that. I don't know. I suppose a director's got to eat. JP, let's cover your scores and see where you landed on the old Doctor Sleep.
All right.
Story, what did you give it?
I give it a 9.
That's, I mean, you're like tracking with Dan. What about acting?
8.5. I think it's pretty solid all around.
Yep, that's so that's a 1 point lower than Dan and a 0.5 lower than Cole. Effects.
I gave it an 8.5, but in hindsight, I think I could have gave it a little bit more. I have a memory of like a goldfish, so sometimes it takes me literal like days after I watch a movie to like think about like, oh yeah, there was so many scenes of like vampires turn into smoke or whatever, and I kind of forgot all about those. So I could have went a little higher. I mean, it is a lot of CG, but I do think it's pretty good for the most part. But yeah, I give it 8.5.
Don't be harsh on yourself. It's only a 0.5 lower than what Cole and Dan gave. It's not like you're wildly off. What about soundtrack?
8.5 as well. Probably my weakest category is soundtrack stuff, just because sometimes I don't remember what in the moment, unless it's a movie I saw a bunch of times. But I do like the needle drops for like the original like shining sounds and stuff like that.
Nice. So that's an 8.5 from there. So that's a 0.5 lower than Dan and 1 point lower than Cole. Lastly, kills.
I went 9. The baseball kid death, even though it's not like a like Friday the 13th kill where it's like a cool looking kill, the impact of that kill was so high that it made my score go up like tremendously, just because they had the balls to do that scene.
No pun intended. I love it. Right, so you give it as a total of a potential 43 and a half, which means that is a 0.5 lower than Cole and 2 points clear below what Dan gave it. Let's turn it over. I know everyone's pretty much talked around all the points anyway, David, so unless you absolutely fucking hate this movie, like you're disgusted by its very presence here, I can't imagine you're gonna be swinging out anything massively controversial here, but I am still very much interested in your thoughts. Anything we've neglected to speak about that you want to highlight, or anything that Dan said that you're like, yeah, spot on for Dr. Sleep?
No, I mean, pretty much everything that's already been said is kind of in line with what I would have actually had said if I would have went like earlier in the order. It's the only thing I'll just kind of double down, or I guess like triple down, is I just love the fact that he could bridge all of that stuff together to make a movie like this. Because I had read the book before seeing this, and I think this is now like my third or fourth time seeing it. Like the theatrical cut, and I've seen the director's cut like once, and like just some of the stuff that they can incorporate in here and make this story flow. I know adapting Stephen King can be tough just because he is so wordy and he has so much like extra detail, that Flanagan be able to condense that down into this and have a 2.5 hour movie that doesn't necessarily feel like it is pretty impressive to me.
Very nice. Right, let's talk scores then for you, David. What about story? What are you giving it?
I gave the story a 10. I normally don't for adaptations, just because I kind of take originality away from you, but just the fact that he could bridge the like Shining novel and then bridge the Kubrick film and then do all that. He
made it harder for himself. You know
exactly.
What I mean?
So like right doing that, I had to give him the full point just because I'm like, that's impressive to do.
That is exactly the same score that Cole gave it. You're 1 point higher than Dan and JP. What did you give the acting?
For me, I gave the acting also a 10. I was in the same boat where I didn't know how McGregor would do in a movie like this, just because of everything that I've seen is more mainstream, where like not really horror. So actually seeing him here and being able to almost channel the his like father into this role is kind of impressive to do. And then you see him getting clean. So that was really kind of impressive. And then Rebecca Ferguson just plays a great villain. And I was just kind of impressed, as well as everybody who reprises roles from The Shining into this. None of them were like, outside of what was kind of said about like Jack impersonation, I think it still all kind of just works in what was needed.
Very nice. That's a 10. That's the highest score that anyone gave. It's a 0.5 above what Dan gave it. Effects, where are you coming in on that?
I came in for a 9 on this one. The only thing I'll just kind of say here is that I like to see what you can do practically, which I gave all the credit there, especially with the baseball kid death and everything. There is some just CGI that like I don't necessarily love, but it's none of it's bad. They have the money behind it and it works. Very
nice. So that's a 9 for the effects. That, if we look at the average here, that is pretty much the average. So Dan gave a 9 and Cole did. JP was only a 0.5 lower, so pretty much the kind of consensus there. Soundtrack for yourself, what are you giving it?
For me, I gave this one a 10 just because they do incorporate so much from the original that I love, but then they also do their own thing with it. And really, kind of the only thing that I want to add here that nobody else kind of had brought up, I love that heartbeat tone that they put through for this, that you kind of hear throughout the movie at different scenes, because that just gets my anxiety going so much that I almost feel like my heart kind of beats in sync with what they're doing here. And that's kind of impressive to do, to make you have that sort of reaction from me.
Very nice. So that is E10, which is the highest score that anyone gave for soundtrack. And then lastly, kills.
For kills, I give this one an 8, only because like the baseball kid death, that one is in a like league on its own. Other than that, there's not a whole lot of kills, and when they're all kind of very similar. It's a lot of people just like kind of getting shot and everything like that. So I just came in with an 8 there.
8, right, so that would put you one below Dan and a 1.5 above the low score, which was from Cole, which means out of a maximum of 50 points, you gave Dr. Sleep 47, which is damn near the top. So at the end of that, we can say that the high scores for Dr. Sleep were actually given by David with 47. Second highest was Dan with 45.5, then Cole with 44, and JP with 43.5. So all those scores really fucking high. Dan, I would like to thank you very much for representing your movie. You now may step down from the docket, and we will turn our attention to the next movie, which will be represented by one Mr. Cole. The next movie is, of course, Deadly Friend. Now, here we go. This is directed by horror auteur Wes Craven. It is based on the novel by Diana Henstill, but the screenplay was done by Bruce Joel Rubin. The director of photography for this one, or DP for short, is Philip H. Lathrop, who did, wait for it, Breakfast at Tiffany's and the original Pink Panther movie, which I do adore, so he gets cred from me there. Died within a couple of years of making this movie through, I would imagine, shame, which I'm just throwing out there just for Lacey. I don't mean it, it's just a joke, Lacey. It's just a fucking joke. Stop shouting. The score here is done by Charles Bernstein, who, I mean, did a who's who of horror score in the 80s, most notably Cujo, A Nightmare on Elm Street, April Fool's Day, and the list goes on and on. The cast here, we have Kirsty Swanson. Matthew, you have a name that sounds like a Transformer. I don't even know how you pronounce that. Laborato? That's not right. But it is now Laboratron. The Laboratron 5000. That's his surname. Michael Sharrett and Tommy and Ramsey, Richard Marcus, Russ Marin, Lee Paul, Andrew Roberto, Charles Fleischer, Robert Nguyen, and we could have been here forever with the cast, so that's where I cut it off, because no one cares. The synopsis for this movie is: after his friend is killed by her abusive father, the new kid in town attempts to save her by implanting a robotic microchip into her brain. So, as I like to call that, science. The trivia here for this movie. Kirsty Swanson said that she had probably thrown the basketball, don't know what basketball scene we could be talking about here, over 100 times during the reshoot filming of Elvira's death scene. Wes Craven kept telling me to throw it as hard as I could to indicate great speed. Must have tossed that ball about 100 times. My arms sure felt like I did. Swanson also did an interview with Maxim magazine in May 2000. Is Maxim still a thing? Or is the internet destroyed fappable material? I just want to find out. I don't know. In May 2000, that the fake head that was stuffed with actual cow brains that the production crew picked up from a butcher's shop. So they went full in with the viscera. Although a critical and financial failure, I can't imagine why, at the time it was released, over the years, Deadly Friend has become a cult movie and garnered a fan following. According to Wes Craven, the film had 7 or 8 producers, and each had their own idea of what the film should be like, which is usually a good sign that it's going to be a hot mess. That's all the information for this one. The podcast Under the Stairs at this time would like to call to the docket one Mr. Cole, who is going to represent this movie. Either for or against, we'll find out. Cole, the floor is yours, sir.
Oh dear.
Ladies and gentlemen of the court, follow me on a journey. Let me take you back to a time, the 80s, when Wes Craven was still making good movies. The year is 1986, and Kristy Swanson is about to take on her first starring role 1 year, at 16 years old, before she started dating 40-year-old Alan Thicke. Forget blurred lines, that was some blurred judgment, but I digress. As this gem of a film seduces you with all its glory of 80s synth soundtrack, be sure to buckle up for some of the best practical effects and gore that's never talked about. 2 words, blood bukkake. And no, we're not talking about Cannibal Corpse. This has one of the greatest exploding head scenes in cinema, as Mama Fratelli finally gets it as she eats a basketball. Ron Howard gets extra crispy, and it's capped off by a great effect of skin peeling off some arms and face. Now, when it comes to the acting, or a super smart AI that doesn't talk but rather babbles like an incoherent gremlin, or Sam's unexplained super strength, or the abruptness of the third act in conclusion, let me ask you one question. Do you know who Chewbacca is? Chewbacca is a Wookiee from the planet Kishik, but he lives on the planet Endor. Now think about it. That does not make sense. Why would a Wookiee, an 8-foot-tall Wookiee, live on Endor with a bunch of 2-foot-tall Ewoks? That does not make sense. But more important, you have to ask yourself, what does this have to do with the case? Nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, it has nothing to do with the case. It does not make sense. Look at me. I'm a lawyer defending a popular film director's movie, and I'm talking about Chewbacca. Does that make sense? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not making any sense. None of this makes sense. And so you have to remember, when you're in that jury room, deliberating and conjugating the emancipation of the proclamation, does it make sense? No. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it does not make sense. If Chewbacca lives on Endor, you must acquit. The defense rests.
I mean, that might be my favourite of this one.
First time watch. First time watch.
Pulled it off.
Was that? Yeah, it was. I'd never seen it all the way through, so I thought I had, but I was getting it muddled up with Wes Craven's got another. Is it Deadly Blessing?
Deadly Blessing.
Deadly Blessing, which
that's
I
like
thought,
the Amishy one.
Yes, which I thought was this movie, and I was like, does not have like Ernest Borgnine or something, and I was like that. Oh well, like we'll sit down and watch this movie, and I was like, I wonder why Lacey is so like pushing this so hard, out with the fact Wes Craven directed it, and pretty much anything associated with Scream gets a maximum of 10. That's right, Lacey, calling you out, because she's listening. I know she is. But then I have seen about half of this, and it was years ago. So once I got into certain bits, it all started to gel together. So much so that, because I've liked to do this in every episode, I did grab a little sounder for this one, and of all the movies I could have picked the sounder for, it was from Deadly Blessing. So ladies and gentlemen, I give you this. I mean, it seemed that. That was the sound of my brain exploding watching this movie. Let's to the layman out there, Cole, they're going to sit there and say, I mean, it sounds like he enjoyed it, but did he enjoy it? He talked about Wookiees. Is there a score for Wookiees in this one? If it is, I imagine it's getting a 10. I don't know, but I do know, but these guys don't know, and the listeners don't know. So let's find it. You've confused me as well. This kind of Jedi mind
Chewbacca
trick
defense
stuff
works
here.
every time.
The Chewbacca defense fits every fucking time. Let's talk about your scores here, buddy. What did you give the story for Deadly Friend?
I gave the story an 8. I loved it.
Seems high.
First time watch. I was pretty down on myself because when we were doing the drawing for this, everybody was like, oh, haha, look who's got that movie. And I was like, oh, fuck. But I was pleasantly surprised. It was a lot of fun.
You gave this one an 8. What about the acting?
I gave the acting a very deservedly 4 out of 10.
Yeah, this one went right off a cliff for you.
That's all I'm going to say about that. But
That's
we can go past that one real fast.
Yeah, what about effects? Because you spoke highly of effects here, so...
10 out of 10. I absolutely love the effects. The exploding head, the kills were great. Even to cap it off at the end with just, I mean, it was done. I looked up to see who the special effects and who the art department, all that was. I was expecting a big name. nothing. I mean, when you don't even have a picture on your IMDb profile and you put out a movie like this, like, man, that's props to you, buddy.
So you give that a maximum of 10.
Oh.
Soundtrack?
Hell yeah. Soundtrack, 9 out of 10. I mean, this is 80s glory, man. I loved it.
And lastly, kills.
10 out of 10. 10 out of 10. I loved them. Loved them. Practical effects up the ass.
Right, which means, Cole, out of a maximum of 50 that you could give in this movie, Lacey's going to be fist pumping the air right now. Or Dan's anus, one of the two. That's Dan, her respective partner, and not Dan on the recording right now. Let's
Thank
get
goodness.
confusing here. Too many Dans. You give this a 41 out of 50, which is
That's tracking. That's tracking.
that is tracking for sure. Let's work our way around here to see if anyone agrees, disagrees, or finds some common middle ground. We're going to go in order of the hosts that are reviewing on the show. So we will make our first stop with Dan. Anything that you want to say off the back of Cole's review, which doesn't involve Wookiees? That's a smoke screen. Wookiees are a smoke screen. I don't want to spend any more time talking about Wookiees. I want views in the movie, please.
Oh, okay.
As he
I got a
tears
lot
up
to say about Wookiees.
as he tears up 3 pages of notes he's made and throws them away.
Oh. So sad now. Okay. I guess. Wow.
Was this the first time being for you?
No, not at
Right,
all.
yeah.
Oh no, I'm a child of the 80s. This was like, I don't even know how many times I've seen this movie.
All right.
Seriously, like probably too many. But yeah, wow, this movie though. I agree with Cole though that because I put in my notes, BB just sounds like a fucking gremlin all the time.
Mm-hmm.
He's just doing the
Pretty good gremlin.
like. Why is he
Super
a
smart?
robot? Should not babble that much. No, it's weird. I thought it was Frank Welker too, not Frank Welker. So I was pleasantly surprised.
What about some of the other points that scored above and below for Cole in terms of the? How do you think the acting is like right off a cliff, or you a bit more?
Well, we got to
changed
get to the. We got to get to the story first.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna get to your points. I just mean in general, just in generalities here. Any issues at all with the acting that you can pick up on?
I thought it was just like I thought it was proper and it was where it needed to be. It's. I mean, the movie has a very campy premise, so. I mean, I thought they actually delivered it pretty straight for as goofy as the story is. Right.
Let me dig into these scores then, because I'm kind of feeling like you're a kid of the 80s. You're talking a good game here, but the scores back up the good game, Dan. Story, what are you giving it out of 10?
Well, I gave it a 6.5.
You give it a 6.5?
I mean, well, here's the thing. I mean, I would love to know what the forensic evidence this kid leaves behind. Like, I mean, he fucking leaves it everywhere. Like when he's trying to stash like the dad bod in the coal hamper or whatever. Like, what is it? There's just fingerprints all over the place, and it leads me to believe like this kid's just book smart. He's not smart. The story in general, though, I mean, it's pretty basic.
So you give it 6.5. That is a 1.5 lower than Cole's score. Acting, we spoke about it before. Maybe not the swan dive off the cliff that maybe Cole thought it was. I can see that from your score, but I need you to tell me the score and justify it though.
I gave it a 7. I thought the acting, like I said, it's very serviceable. It's always great to see Anne Ramsey just being a hag.
Hashtag.
Yeah.
She's even more garbly in this movie. Like, she's
sure.
much more like what Goonies is what 86, 87?
84.
Is the Goonies 84?
I think it is 84.
Is
Yeah.
it?
Well, she
Right,
sounds garbly because this is 2 years before she died of throat cancer.
Oh,
Thanks,
that
Cole.
makes sense.
Thanks,
Goonies
Cole.
is 85, so 1 year earlier.
So it was 1 year earlier. Well, things got a bit weird. Thanks for making me feel like a shithead, Cole. Always rely on you. Back with these points in a
Jeez,
minute.
Duncan, talk about insensitive.
I'm Scottish. We don't have sensitivity
Unreal.
over here. Don't have sensitivity or KFC. We do have KFC. I just want to stress that. Last time I cracked that joke, people were like, "Oh, I'll get over to Scotland at some point." And I'm like, "It's been here for decades. We don't live on the moon."
Yeah, but
Right.
is it chicken or is it like mutton or whatever you guys eat over there?
It's chicken.
Oh,
We have chickens over here. Not that I want to cast shade, but our chicken might be more like chicken than your chicken.
That's probably true.
Our chickens
So-
will kick your chicken's ass though on all those steroids.
Yeah, they will.
Also true.
Especially they're
Yeah, our
drinking that
chickens
Flint,
can't-
Michigan water, right, David?
Yeah, our chickens can't bench anything, and I wouldn't put it past your chickens being able to bench like 200 pounds. You're just like, "Rah!" Like, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
That's got in my head. For the listeners out there, I emulated lifting weights with wings as a chicken. Let's go acting here. No, we've done it. Let's go effects.
I give
Right,
the effects this. Yeah,
Yeah, I was gonna say Cole's really high on the effects here, so don't break his heart.
I gave him a 7. I liked them. They were fine. I think my biggest beef is probably that questionable nightmare sequence at the end, where it's a transformation into like robot human hybrid, and it's peeling the skin off. I thought like, where's like the blood and stuff for this?
Mm-hmm.
It was just like really rubbery looking. But I think like BB looks kind of like shitty in a good way. Because like a kid made it, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just like cruising around and it's their friend. And I was like, oh, this is so fucking 80s. Like we all thought like we should have like shitty robot friends.
Yeah, shitty in a good way is exactly how I describe every picture that my daughter's ever made and handed to me. I painted a picture. This is shitty in a good way. Going on the what? No, I'm trying to claw back some sense of humour after
Oh, yeah, on the icebox.
cancer. Yep. Right, so that's a 7. So it's 3 below what Cole gave it. Soundtrack. Cole's all about that synth. He's all about that 80s. He's all about that good shit. What say you, man, that's seen this movie many times, Dan?
Okay, so I gave it a 6. And here's the thing. I think that for the most part, this soundtrack sounds like a made-for-TV movie. However, it would have scored way lower. But that whole end credits BB song is fucking bananas. Baby.
I do love it when a movie can just throw in a song, not just like a score, but a song. Let's just make a let's make a song for the movie, guys. It's kind of almost a lost art these days. So you give it a 6. That's 3 below what Cole gave it. Lastly, kills.
I gave it a 7. I mean, come on, that basketball scene. We're all going to talk about it.
Yeah.
We all know. Like, some people haven't even seen this movie, but they know the basketball head explosion. Like, man, I wish Mythbusters had tried that to see, like, can you explode? Yeah, like how fast does it have to go to explode an old woman's head?
Yeah. I mean, science. I'm sure there will be someone out there that has calculated the amount of pressure and the speed that the basketball will have to travel. We have smart listeners. That is a 7, so that's 3 below Cole, which means, Dan, out of a maximum of 50 points you could have given this movie, you gave it a 33.5, which is quite a bit lower than what Cole gave it. However, that's just one man's voice. Got another 2 people that jump in here. We're going to swing our way around to JP. JP, anything that has been said, hasn't been said, anything that you're like way off the mark, or actually they're spot on. What do you think?
You know, honestly, this movie, I've seen it before, and I kind of rolled my eyes at it when it came up. It's been years, and watching it again, I was like, you know what? It's 80s camp. This movie feels incredibly 80s. Like everything from just like the zany plot of like computer chip implanted into brain of dead girlfriend thing. It's like like nobody questioned it back then. It's like, I don't know how technology works.
I mean,
So-
if we're working just now, Elon Musk has implanted a microchip in a
right?
person's
Yeah,
brain. So
Wes Craven was way ahead of his time.
way ahead.
Somebody had mentioned, or Duncan mentioned, that there was 7 or so producers on this film. Or
Yeah, there's
something.
7 or 8 according to Wes Craven. So
Yeah, I imagine that's probably true. Wes Craven being my favorite director, even though there's obviously inconsistencies with Wes Craven, but he is probably my favorite director. I think this movie is a fun movie that I could definitely throw on rotation in like the October season, just as like a background movie. It's pretty fun, but
Very
way funner
nice.
than I remembered.
way funner than you remembered. Let's see if the scores reflect that. What did you give story?
I gave it a 7.
That is 1 lower than Cole. What did you give the acting?
7.
So that is 3 above, and also the same score that Dan gave it. Effects?
Would have been a 7, but Mama Fratelli, basketball kill. That is a damn good effect. So 7.5.
7.5. So that is 2.5 lower than Cole and a 0.5 higher than Dan. What did you give the soundtrack?
7.
I like you're in the middle between what Cole gave it and what Dan gave it. And lastly, kills.
It would have been a 7, but there's a certain basketball scene that I had to give you have to give at least a half point to that, right? So
Yep.
7.5.
7.5. If only we had a sounder for that. Literally hear the cow brains fly.
I must
out
be the only one that had a problem with Sam's acting and her like little claw kind of hands and that whole thing.
And you'll find that
TV
my
hands.
scores at the ended, so maybe
I'm
more
a little
aligned than you think.
easygoing on acting. It's probably like the thing that I care about the least in movies. I mean, I watch everything from shot on video to, so like whenever there's acting that's like good enough to just get through the movie, I usually give it a 7.
I tend to get us through the plot. Right. Overall, JP, the maximum of 50 points. You gave this one 36. So that is a decent, respectable score for the movie. We have one more person who, once again, has landed the last spot. But it's worth getting David's thoughts on this one. David, anything that hasn't been mentioned or you want to reiterate or anything in between?
Oh, I mean, obviously the basketball kill is phenomenal. This was a first time watch for me,
Boom.
but kind of what
Because you're
Dan
a
was
young
saying,
pup.
I knew. Well, I mean, I think I'm getting.
I think
older
these
here.
are, compared to me, I think you're all quite young. So
Oh, that's fair. Touche.
There we go.
But I mean, I knew about that kill long before I ever saw this movie, so that was one of the things I was pretty excited to actually get to see play out and see how everything kind of fit into this. And I mean, I'll actually just kind of say here what JP said. This is a fun movie where like I don't love it, but this is one that I would put on and just kind of do other things, watch some of the stuff that's good, and then just kind of go about my day because nothing is like completely horrible that it's going to ruin my like anything if I'm actually sitting down and checking it out.
Very nice, very nice. Well, let's talk about your scores, buddy. What did you give story?
I gave it a 6. There's some stuff that actually, kind of what you guys were saying, fits now more a day where it would be like, oh, okay, I could see that happening. So it's kind of fun to see something this long ago that actually kind of had that type of storyline. There's some inconsistencies here and there with some of the stuff, but I mean, I just roll with it.
Cool. So that would be 2 points lower than what Cole gave it, and the nearest to you would be Dan, who gave it a 0.5 above. Acting?
I gave the acting a 6. Yeah, there's some stuff that's not great here. One of the things I actually wanted to bring up is I got so confused how old Paul is supposed to be in this kind of thing.
I think he's like high school, but he's like just a very smart, like.
I think they
ahead of
said
us.
sophomores
what I thought.
in the beginning of the film. Sophomores, which
Okay.
okay.
So I got confused because, the paper boy was like, oh, are you a sophomore? He's like, I'm a sophomore. He's like, well, I go take classes at the college. And I was like, okay.
Super
I'm like, is
smart.
this
Yeah, I
kid
think
supposed to be?
it's alluding that he's like way smarter than
Okay.
high schooler. Like,
So I can
he's
roll
like,
with that then,
past
yeah.
his high school.
Right, so that was acting at a 6, so that is 2 above what Cole gave it, but 1 below what both JP and Dan gave it. Effects?
In fact, I had to go 8 here just because, like, that, the basketball death is amazing. And actually, some of the other ones were kind of brutal that I wasn't necessarily expecting him to go places with, like breaking the neck and then just burning the face off of the father. So, I mean, I can roll with that.
Perfect. So that's 8. So that is 2 below what Cole gave it. Soundtrack?
I gave it a 6. I probably would have went higher, but I had forgotten about the BB song for the credits because I probably would have given another half point to a point just because I do remember that after it got brought up, and that did crack me up to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm not going to fast forward the credits to make sure that there's nothing at the very end of this.
There we go, 6. So that is 3 below what Cole gave it, and same as what Dan gave it. Lastly, kills.
I went 7 here. The only thing that kind of hurt it for me was just the death for Sam. It was kind of just weird that like she gets like smacked and then like rolls down the stairs, but they make it seem a little bit more brutal with how like quickly she passes away. But still not going to ruin the deaths that we got here because there are some great ones, as I was saying earlier. So that's what I came in with a 7.
Very nice, which means out of a total of 50 points you could have given this movie, you gave it 33 in total, which means the highest scorer was the reviewer of the movie. That would be Cole, who gave it 41 points. In second place was JP, who gave it 36. In third place, it was Dan with 33.5, just a half a point above David, who gave its low score at 33. All that's left for me to say is thank you very much, Cole, for representing your movie. You now may step down from the docket as we move on to our next movie, which is Thirst by Park Chan-Wook. This one will be represented by JP, but of course, at first, let me give you some details on this movie. This one is going to be fun as we get to the cast. This is directed by Park Chan-Wook, came out in 2009. It is based on some original story by Emile Zola, kind of co-adapted for the screen by Park Chan-Wook and Chung So-kyun. The DP on this one is Chung Hoon-chung, who has done loads of Park Chan-Wook movies. Actually started working with him on Old Boy, has done pretty much every movie up since then, but is also notably known as the cinematographer behind It, the remake, and Last Night in Soho as well. The score here is done by Cho Young-wook, who's also done tons of Park Chan-Wook movies. He actually started working with them with his debut movie Joint Security Area, which is fucking badass if you've never seen it. Not horror, but excellent. And has worked with him right through everything from the Vengeance trilogy, minus Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance onwards. Cast here, a lot of names that are going to be hard to pronounce, so strap in. Song Kang-ho, Kim Ok-bin, Cho Hee-jin, So Dong-so, Hao Rong-lee, Ra Mi-ran, Park In-han, the Scottish accent, just nailing it, Yong Wan-gu, and Hwang Woo-soo-hee. Authentic as fuck. Synopsis for this movie is, through a failed medical experiment, a priest is stricken with vampirism and is forced to abandon his religious ways. Trivia for this one. The movie borrows many elements from Emile Zola's novel Three Requiem, and Taeju is named after Three, and Lady Ra is named after Madame Requiem. This is the first mainstream Korean movie to feature full frontal male nudity, and I say free the dong in cinema. Let it flop, get out. It's what I'm saying. I'm glad to see that has been a trend since then.
This will be the first Teaputs episode to feature full frontal male nudity as well.
I've recorded many episodes with the Baz. I can tell you will not be the first episode. It's just we never released those in videos, and sadly my you wonder why I don't sleep well, because that image haunts me. The 148-minute director's cut of the film is Park Chan-Wook's preferred version of this film to date. It has only been released in South Korea and France on DVD and Blu-ray. All other home video releases, including the US Blu-ray and DVD, only contain the theatrical cut. I don't know if that's still the case. I think Criterion may have put out Thirst now, and if they have, I would imagine Criterion has probably picked up that theatrical cut I want to say they did, because I remember going like that, do I own a third copy of Thirst? Or is 2 copies enough? Do I import from the States? Behave yourself, Duncan. So yeah, you never tell. Sometimes when they date those things, it's not right. So I don't want to be false advertising anything. Someone comes back at me, I've got the film kit, and I'm like, all right, that's great. Okay. The podcast Under the Stairs at this time calls to the docket one Mr. JP as we hear his review either for or against the movie Thirst. JP, the floor is yours.
Yeah, Thirst is a movie that I'm pretty familiar with. I've seen it a handful of times, including for one of your past shows, Duncan.
Yeah, summer series.
But I think that this movie is super unique in the way that it blends this romantic vampire film with this really out there comedy that I remember. I must have missed the earlier comedic parts, and then once the dead boyfriend starts reappearing, I remember the first time I seen it, I was so confused on what was happening, but it was just supposed to be it's metaphorical, I was taking it literal. I was like, where the hell did this dude come from? But yeah, I think that this movie just works so well from the. You really just don't know what the hell's going on for a while, and then it starts this romance that develops into this sort of toxic romance, and then you have the whole internal battle with the religion and becoming a vampire, and this movie is beautifully shot too. There's some great shots in this film. I particularly love the scene on the lake just because of how moody it feels, and then I think that even the effects of the vampires hopping from roof to roof is just fun.
Asian vampires. That's what a lot right. Full into it. That's what happens in Asian vampire movies, and they just do it. So
so it's this traditional sort of vampire mythology mixed with sort of this modern telling of this story, and this way that the love story begins, and then the middle, and then finally the end, the almost Thelma and Louise end of it. I really like. I'm not honestly. It's funny because I never thought I was into romance horror, but I actually love a handful of romance horror movies. When they're done right, they really do work. And the one thing that really got under my skin in this movie is the boils. When after they haven't drank blood for a while, they get boils, and it's really just gross. Yeah. But the comedy in this movie is so different from United States comedy or Western comedy, it took me a while to understand it in particularly South Korean movies. But once you sort of get it, it's really funny. This movie is pretty funny. But yeah, I love this movie. I don't know. I don't have a whole lot of criticisms for it. I've always liked it. I've seen it, I don't know, 4 or 5 times. It's long.
Yes,
it's very long. But it doesn't feel overly long. But if you are going to watch it, you need to set a chunk of time aside to watch it. But yeah, I'm a big fan of this movie.
It's interesting when you compare it to so we've already at this stage recorded the review of the other the other Stoker movie. Listen to me, the other Park Chan-Wook movie, Stoker, and they're about the same runtime. There isn't really that much, maybe about 10 minutes of a difference between the two movies, which is kind of baffling, because if anything, Stoker leans it's not nearly as action packed as this movie,
right?
But you're not fully aware of the runtime maybe as much as you are when you watch Thirst. So it's a small observation. And also, he went away and did an American movie called Stoker, which just makes me think of Bram Stoker, and I'm like, and he made it right after this, and I'm like, it's vampires in the brain. So you just don't know with these things. Right, let's get into your scores, JP. Let's see how they reflect what you've said. What did you give the story?
Gave it a 9.
Boom. Very nice. The acting,
9,
the effects,
8,
the soundtrack,
8,
and lastly the kills.
8 as well.
Scoring pretty high. Out of a maximum of 50 points you could have given this movie, you gave it a 42. Let's open the floor up though. I'm always curious to hear where other people come in, especially when watching a South Korean horror movie, because you just never know. And 2 specifically Park Chan-Wook movies, which can be, they mix a lot. We're going to go in the order of the hosts. We mentioned that before. So the first one up will be Dan. Dan, anything that you want to lean in on, go back on. Anything that you just don't think is accurate at all in what JP just said there.
No, I really have to say that the comedy, I'm glad that he picked up on that, because it feels like it comes in a little bit later in the film. Like once they start having like the illusional 3-way weird, like it just gets super weird, and I'm like, oh, okay, I like where this movie's going. But yeah, it's very much a story about toxic relationships, and because they have that really good just excitement of, hey, we're doing something that we both shouldn't be doing. Like she's having an affair, he's a priest, and they're both doing, for lack of a better term, naughty things, right? But once they get further into the story and they're just a couple, and it becomes boring for them, and they don't, all that excitement is gone. And I really like that aspect of the story.
Yeah, illusional 3-way is what I call every masturbation that I have. It's true. I don't know how to follow up that. Right, let's get into your scores. I know exactly how to follow that up. This is how you follow up. Which is also the sound of me orgasming. Right, let's get to your score, Stan. Too much sex talk. It's because Cole's here. Blaming him. The story, what did you give the story for first?
I gave it a 8.5. This movie is horny as fuck.
It's a 0.5
I
lower.
enjoyed it.
0.5 lower than GP. Horny as fuck, says Dan on the front cover. Acting, what did you give the movie?
I gave it a 9. I thought everybody did a really great job, and it felt really believable. I mean, we have to watch it with subtitles, but like my thing that I always say is, like, when you're watching a foreign film and you're reading the subtitles and you just begin to hear that dialogue in their voice as you read it, if it can do that, great.
Perfect. So you are spot on with what JP gave this movie in acting. Effects?
I gave it an 8. I thought the effects were really like gross, and like, oh man, that fucking fingernail shit. Like, just, I wanted to throw up. It was great.
So that's spot on with JP as well. Soundtrack?
Soundtrack, let's see here. 6.5. It was just there.
Yeah, it's so that's a 1.5 lower than JP. And then lastly, kills.
I gave it a 7.5. There's not a whole lot of on-screen killing happening, but there's some cool stuff. I mean, it all kind of like was in service to the story. Like the end with them, like burning up in the sun was, like that was kind of fun, but like that whole scene had some very ropey CG happening with, like, why do you have to like film water in CG? I don't understand. Just throw a trunk in some water,
That is a 0.5 below what JP gave it, which means out of a maximum of 50 points, you give it 39.5. Let's go to Cole. Cole, anything that has been mentioned thus far that you want to double down on, big up even more, or tell people to hold their horses? Maybe they're getting ahead of themselves.
No, I'm triple down on everything so far. So this is the, one of my 2 first time watches, And this has been on my radar for a
yeah.
while. And actually, I believe it was you, Duncan, that put this on my radar. I don't know if it was summer series or what, but I always
It's
wanted
usually
to
my
see
fault.
it. Yeah. But it wasn't too accessible at the time. So the runtime is a little bit long. It's although, like JP said, it doesn't seem as long as 2.5 hours. It does take a while for the setup, but I did love the direction it goes. You know, I called it the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Vampires. You know, that was a pretty cool scene with the leaping from the because, you know, they set it up good where when he picked her up and jumped off, you're like, oh God, like, is it too tall? Is he going to bust his legs and have to regrow them or some shit? Dan, I agree. The CGI, it's noticeable, which means it's not good. With all the fucking weird foot fetish shit going on, I'm just surprised that Quentin Tarantino wasn't one of the producers on this. That's one of the things.
He's a big fan of this movie. He's a big fan of this movie.
Oh yeah, of course he is.
That's his imaginary three-way.
Yeah. Well, what do they say? Sex with 3 people is called a threesome. Sex with 2 people is called a twosome, and that's why they call me handsome.
Yep. I love America. I really do. Oh man. How do you follow that up now? I was going to press the sender. I'm not going to do it. Let's talk about your scores then. So first time viewing, I'm loving this. What did you give the story?
So I gave the story a 10, just because when it comes to certain genres, it's easy to say that they're overdone and it's the same thing, but this one was so unique. I loved it. I loved the setup, the backstory, the direction it went. You know, it was almost like a mini series in a film. So the story I loved it.
Awesome. So that is 1 above what GP gave it. What did you give the acting?
I gave the acting a 10 as well. So
motherfucking 10.
Yeah, I Kong Sang Ho and that I forgot the chick, but man, they were so good, and I love.
Yeah, I'm not repeating. Cool.
Spoilers
again.
Spoilers, but the arc she had was I loved it. That little kind of I don't want to spoil it, but the scene where she kind of you're like, oh, what the fuck. So yeah, great acting.
Cool. Right, so that's a 1 above what GP gave it as well. Effects?
I gave the effects a 9, which kind of contradicts a little bit of the CGI, but when you kind of lump the effects in as far as with the kills, I guess, I thought it was done well. It was a good mix.
Nice. So that is a 1 above what GP gave it, 1 above what Dan gave it as well. Soundtrack?
7. It's nothing spectacular, but there were aspects that it did add to the scene in question. So,
yeah, perfect. You're right in the middle between the 2 scores thus far. And then lastly, kills.
8.5. 8.5. The everything from the uniqueness of them and him showing his strength. I loved when he took the cork opener and straightened it up, and that scene was done well. It got pretty brutal with some certain scenes. The neck punch, came out of left field. That was pretty awesome. Hang them up so they're cut their ankles off, and it was pretty good. And then obviously you got to have that whole scene of, you can't do a vampire film without having them turn to ashes at the end. But that whole lead up to that whole 10 out of 10 with the way it ended. 10 out of 10. I loved that whole thing. So, I don't think you could have done that ashes burning up in the sun scene any better than that lead up.
Perfect. Right. So that is the 8.5. That is the 0.5 above what JP gave it, which means out of a maximum of 50 points, you gave Thirst 44.5. Let's go to David, who is closing us out here. Like, David, you get to lead on the next movie, so you get the Royce in first. Nice. Anything that hasn't been mentioned, or anything you want to reiterate, or anything else?
Yeah, the first thing I was going to say is I actually watched this. Obviously, the first time was for Summer Series back when, it was on there. And then
You're welcome.
actually earlier this year, this came to the local theater that I'm a member at. So I actually got to see it on the big screen in January. So that was kind of a fun thing to kind of check out there. But the only two things that I was going to bring up that I really kind of didn't hear is that we almost have like this superhero type thing here in that she manipulates so many people to get her way throughout this, and a lot of it's because she's had such a rough life where she hasn't really got to make a lot of decisions. But I love how when she becomes a vampire, she realizes then she doesn't need anybody else, and even like the only time she ever comes back around to him is when she kind of has her back up against the wall where she can't necessarily just get away with something. She needs him to kind of help things out. So I do love that about her character, is that because of how beat down she's been, she's finally like stepping up. And the other thing is just kind of bringing up again, like the abandoning of religion for him. I just love that because like, he's like, this is a sin. We can't do this. And she's like, that's not my religion. This isn't a sin to me. We can do whatever we want to. And I love that whole idea, especially being Korean, where not everybody follows Christianity over there, and kind of using that whole thing to kind of play with both of these type of characters.
Very nice. Right, let's get into your scores then. What did you give the story?
For the story, I gave it a 10. There's just so much good that they kind of do. I love how, like, kind of like JP, like, I don't necessarily love, like, romantic horror films, but I love what they kind of do here with that, and just the different elements they kind of bring in as this goes along, because, I mean, kind of what Cole said, this almost feels like a mini-series with how different tonal changes you can have throughout it.
So are we saying, like, everyone's reiterating that they don't really like romantic horror movies? Does that mean there's no one here a Twilight fan?
Never seen it.
My wife is.
You came in a little bit too quick there, Cole. A little bit too defensive, if you ask me. A little bit too defensive. Yeah, feeling that you once had to ask yourself whether you were Team Edward or Team Wolf. Can't remember what the wolf's name was. And no one has mentioned it either, so they didn't fall into my trap.
Team Jacob.
That's what I was going to say. It's Jacob, there we go. The truth will out, David. The truth will out. Right, so I got myself distracted there. We did story.
Yes.
Acting.
Also gave this one a 10. Just, I think they play well off each other so well, and then the comedy works where sometimes that can take me out of movies, but just some of the things they do, especially after she has changed and they play mahjong, and just some of the things that get said and they just kind of like stop and then look around coming up with a way to like try to explain things, and I'm like, I really appreciate that.
Very nice. Right, so you are like charting right now with Cole's scores. Effects for you?
I gave it a 9. There's just some ropey CGI, but outside of that, it's pretty solid what they do.
And once again, charting directly with Cole's scores there, and it's one above so far, one above on each count than JP. Soundtrack?
Gave soundtrack an 8. I thought it was pretty solid.
Spot on with what JP gave it. And lastly, kills.
Kills, this one I gave an 8 as well. I think for me, it's kind of backloaded with a lot of all of that. Just, I mean, it takes so long for them to become vampires that it kind of, and he doesn't want to kill anybody, so it's really until she turns around. But they do some pretty fun stuff, especially where like they bring up how the heartbeat doesn't work anymore, so they have to find ways to get the blood out of them. That I thought was kind of clever as well.
Very nice, right. An 8, you are once again spot on with JP. Which means that of a total of 50, you gave the movie 45. So looking at scores overall, David, you came in highest on this movie with 45. Just above Cole, who gave it a 44.5. Next was JP, and then with 42, and then lastly it was Dan with 39.5. With that, JP, I can thank you very much for your service. You may now step down from the docket, and we will turn our attention to the final movie of this episode. So yeah, it's the Vicious Brothers. We're going to be talking about. They had back-to-back episodes. Dan represented the Vicious Brothers on the previous episode, talking about Grave Encounters, and now we're swinging right into you, David, representing It Stains the Sand Red. Of course, at first, let me give you some details of this movie. So it came out in 2016. It is directed by Colin Minihan, who is one half of the Vicious Brothers, but is based on the story, screenplay, etc. by the Vicious Brothers collectively. The DP on this one is Clayton Moore, who has done Superhost, that movie that was around a couple of years ago, and The Puppet Man, which came out last year and I've heard nothing about, so that doesn't usually mean great things. The score for this movie is handled by Blitz Berlin, and they've done loads. Most notably, recently, Psycho Gorman, but also worked with the Vicious Brothers on Extraterrestrial, and did The Void, a movie that everyone loves, and I should love, but I don't. The cast of this movie is Brittany Allen, Juan Redinger, Merwin Modesier, Christopher Higgins, Andrew Supant, Nico David, and a couple of others. Most of them as background characters. Synopsis of this movie is: in the throes of a zombie apocalypse, a troubled woman from Las Vegas with a dark past finds herself stranded in the desert with a lone and ravenous zombie on her tail. There really wasn't a lot of trivia for this movie at all. Most of it was about planes, and that's such a small part of this movie that I decided to remove most of those. So I picked out two. The first one is filming took place in the Valley of Fire States Park in Nevada, which is a fucking bitchin' name for a state park. The Valley of Fire. Yes, please. And then the second was towards the end of the movie when Molly's looking for her son. A newspaper can be seen with the headline, "The Dead Walk." This is homage to George Romero's Day of the Dead. The newspaper is dated the 12th of September 2001. With that out the way, and for the final time bringing a host up to represent the movie, the podcast Under the Stairs calls David into the docket. David, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, to end this little first volume here out of these type of shows, I will present It Stains the Sands Red. This one came out at a time where this zombie that subgenre was kind of a little bit getting oversaturated. The Walking Dead was still, going pretty strong there. It was starting to kind of drop off maybe a little bit to most people. And I think this one comes in with a solid concept that's a little bit different from a lot of the things that you're seeing. I mean, first you have your lead character. We start off seeing Las Vegas as it's falling apart. Thought that was kind of a cool thing to set us up here where we're going to be. And then not only that, but we're taking her and stranding her in the desert. Something that could just kill you by itself if you didn't have a ravenous zombie chasing after you. Now, this actually kind of reminds me a little bit of like The Dead in that as you're trying to go, you need to rest. Like humanity, you can't just keep going. And you have something that doesn't need to stop. That it's always this thing that's coming after you. It'll keep coming, no matter what you do. And I honestly think that there's a pretty solid redemption story here for Molly. Probably doing something I would do, that if I was walking through the desert with a zombie following after me, I probably would start talking to it and responding for it and probably start yelling at it because it's telling me things that I don't necessarily want to hear. And I'll actually also say here that this is an earlier role for Brittany Allen, if any of the fans of The Boys are out there, because she is on that show. At least in the first season. So then we get some interesting ideas that get introduced. I don't feel like it necessarily goes anywhere though. Because I know they're trying to talk about how she is starting her period and she only has the one tampon. And they're kind of alluding to the fact that maybe it is following the scent of her blood when it loses sight of her. But I feel like that doesn't go anywhere. So I think it's kind of some issues here is that they're presenting interesting, different ideas and then not kind of fleshing them out. And I also don't think this is a great zombie movie until you get to the end where you actually get more than just this one. And I don't necessarily know if they're trying to play off of the idea here that Romero does, where you might be able to train zombies, that they might be able to listen to you. They kind of start doing that, and then obviously it bites her finger, and that actually makes for a pretty cool scene there. But that's what I would have to say here is that I think this is a solid movie. It does kind of fall short with some aspects, but I still enjoyed this one for my second time around.
Very nice, David. Right, let's get into your scores then and see how they reflect what you've just said there. Let's start with story. What did you give the story?
I gave the story a 6. Kind of what I was saying is that there's some things that they try to start going down and then don't kind of follow that thread enough.
Cool. Acting?
I gave it a 7.
The effects?
Thought the effects when we got some of the stuff was pretty good, so I gave it a 7.
The soundtrack?
Soundtrack didn't really stand out to me. For me, I'm kind of like JP sometimes where I might forget about it unless it does something, but I gave it a 6.
And lastly, kills.
I gave this one a 7.
Which means, David, out of a maximum of 50 points, you gave this movie 33. We're now going to turn it over to the other hosts, going in order, and see if they are going to back up what you've said or condemn you as the filthy zombie hater that you are. Let's start with Dan. Dan, Anything you want to pick up from what was said there?
I gotta say that zombies probably my favorite subgenre. I was very surprised when they hit the mainstream, honestly. And yeah, I agree that this did come out in a time where it got played out pretty quick. I mean, there really is only so much you can do, but I really appreciate what this movie did with just the premise. It kept it simple, and it brought some new stuff to the genre, but not really without having to do anything bombastic, I guess.
Interesting. Right, let's go to your scores, buddy. What did you give the story?
I give the story an 8. I liked it. It's fun. Yeah, I don't know. So wrap it up, it's just had a good time with it.
As 2 above what David gave it. Acting?
I gave it an 8. I think it's really hard it's basically a one-woman show for most of the movie, and so she has to really carry it for the most part, and the guy playing the zombie is just he's a zombie. He growls, he leers, he does zombie things. So, but yeah, it's for the 2 of them for most of the movie. It's good.
That's an 8. So that's 1 above what David gave it. What about effects?
I gave it a 9. I'm not quite sure where I came up with that number now that I'm thinking back on it, but it was probably just practical effects. Where I was like, whoa, this is just loaded with practical effects. And there was probably some CG blood here and there, which wasn't terrible. There was some weird color grading issues I noticed. And I'm going to throw it in the effects portion of this because it just went all over the place. Sometimes it'd be oversaturated, and sometimes it was just not.
Does feel at times like someone's going through their Instagram filters and sepia, burning fucking bush, inside industrial, 9 Inch Nails music video. You know what I mean? It does kind of feel like there are kind of presets there, which kind of tracks as a technique that the Vicious Brothers use in almost all their movies, is particular gradings that they bring in. I think it's probably one of the things they're known for. So you give it a 9, so that is 2 above what David gave it. Soundtrack?
I gave it a 6. I'm surprised to hear that it was the same folks that worked on Psycho Goreman.
Yeah, trust me, when I read that earlier on, I was like, that doesn't chop.
I'm a huge soundtrack guy. I will just listen to soundtracks, and I don't know. I just found this one just meh.
You are spot on with what David gave it. Lastly Kills?
I gave it an 8. I mean, it's zombie mayhem, so fun stuff there.
Yep.
Lots of guts and whatever.
Of course, always has to be, or it's not a zombie movie. That is a 1 above what David gave it, which means out of a maximum of 50, Dan, you gave this movie 39. Let's move on to Cole. Cole, what you got to say?
Pretty much in line with these guys here. A little bit stronger on some aspects of it. Again, Dan, zombies are my jam too. Hands down my favorite genre. I've seen this movie a ton of times, and it's fairly high overall with all the aspects of it. One of the things that drives me nuts is when he gets that car stuck. I know it's coming, and it just makes me mad because I'm like, I get that it's a device to move the plot along, but I'm like, come on, do flat tires or something. You could have dug that out in 5 minutes. That drives me nuts.
Also feels like she could sit behind the wheel and he could push the car out, right? A strapping man it's not exactly off a cliff.
Cinematography,
just stop in the road.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe just don't shoot it so it looks like the car's stuck in a 1/4 inch of sand or something, because it just lingers on that, and I'm like, I hit that 30 seconds every time.
I can see your rage right now.
For as much as I like this movie, that's really gets me. The zombies look great. That first kill, again, it sets the tone, because although it's a generic zombie kill, like Dan was saying, the practical effects. I mean, pulling the guts out, it's generic, but I really appreciate the practical effects. The second best use of a tampon in a film, second only to Exorcism at 60,000 feet. So if you guys want some schlock, I highly recommend watching that. It's a gem and a half. The writing is surprisingly solid for a film like this, and it's difficult for a film like this to be engaging, because it is just a one, as Dan said, a one man or one woman show as far as that goes. There's enough that they put in right as it starts to lull to get you back up again. The two guys in the pickup truck, I mean, that's a pretty brutal scene, but it ebbs and flows. I kind of like the character arc that was that David touched on a little bit with the zombie, where he kind of was, he went from being that villain to almost you felt a little bit something for him. One of the biggest things I love and I appreciate with films in general are ones that ask those questions you don't think about until, afterwards, like the aftermath of a slasher. There's 500 people dead and there's one person alive. Like, I wonder how that talk's going with the cops and everyone afterwards, and, explaining how it went, or like Supernatural, like, oh, it wasn't me, it was a ghost. I
love the fact you've said that, because this year A Violent Nature literally gives you that, and the internet fucking hates it.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet. But
well, the end of that movie answers that question that you just mentioned there without spoiling anything. It gives you the aftermath of what something like that might look like, and turns out the internet doesn't like it.
Yeah, see, maybe it's just me, but I loved it. But this asks that question of, in an apocalyptic type event, what happens if only certain people die? And at the end, I mean, spoilers, hit that 30 seconds if you don't want to hear it, but when she goes to that house and the mom and dad are gone, and there's just that little child sitting there. And I mean, it's, as a father, it's something that really gets to you, thinking, what happens if something happens to myself or my wife, and it's, my kids are left. I mean, it's pretty heavy, especially the ending too, with that mom, and, a very heavy movie. So I like this one quite a bit.
Very nice. Well, let's jump into your scores, Cole. What did you give the story?
7.5. I think that, again, the zombie genre is and has been and will probably always be oversaturated. So anything that gives me something where you're not trapped in a house, or, we're going from point A to point B and trying not to get bit by zombies, anything that's a little bit different, I appreciate.
That's cool. Right, so that is 1.5 above David. Acting?
6.5. It was all right. Nothing spectacular, but again, I couldn't find anything on the budget on this film. Which I don't know why I brought up with the acting part, but I had a note about that as well too. But I mean, Brittany Allen did pretty solid.
That's a 0.5 below David. What about effects?
8.5. I thought that, again, with everything being practical, and again, leaning a little bit on, I know that it's a low budget, very, very well done for what they had.
Yeah, you're pretty much in between where David is and where Dan is. Soundtrack?
7. Nothing special. It's there.
And lastly, kills.
I gave it an 8. So some really good kills in there as well. Also some generic, zombie kills, which are to be expected. So
you are in line with Dan's score on that, and one above David, which means out of 50 possible points for the movie, you gave this movie 37.5 out of 50, which brings us to our last voice before we get into the nitty-gritty deets and go through the numbers. JP, anything that has been mentioned, hasn't been mentioned, anything you want to bring up, any gaps? Go for it.
Not really. I think everybody kind of took a lot of my points as well. This film is like Castaway, but instead of Wilson, you have like a zombie. That's the vibe that I got from it. I do appreciate trying something different with a genre that's been, tackled to death. But yeah, I think it's a pretty decent movie. I'd seen it before. Wasn't particularly looking forward to a revisit, but I ended up enjoying it.
Very nice. Right, let's rattle down your scores then. And what did you give the story?
I gave it a 7.
That is one higher than David, and pretty much the average overall score for it, if I look along all four of these. Acting?
I give it a 6.5. Out of all the films, I think that it had like the weakest acting for me, but mainly from like the side characters, like the two dudes she runs into that assault her, like and the boyfriend
very thinly written.
Like all the side characters, I felt very like almost like caricatures of people, you know.
Yeah, if you've seen any kind of post-apocalyptic movie, these are the if you're watching a slasher movie, here is the stoner, here is the, you know, it's like literally ticking all those stereotypes off. Effects?
I give it a 7.
That's exactly what David gave it. Soundtrack?
6.
I mean, yous are all pretty much in or around that score. And lastly, kills?
7.
Once again, all in or around the same score for that as well, which means out of a maximum of 50 points, you gave this movie 33.5, which means self-proclaimed zombie lover himself, Dan, had the highest score on this one with 39. Chart right underneath him is the other guy that loves zombie movies, which would be Cole with 37.5. It is then JP with 33.5, and then at the bottom, it was David with 33. The podcast Under the Stairs would like to thank David for his representation of this movie. And let's get into the nitty-gritty. The numbers behind the numbers. The math behind the math. This is where we put all the world's wrongs to rights and maybe upset Lacey Lou. I don't know. Let's find out. I mean, that may be a wee cherry on top. I don't know. Right. Looking across the total list here, I can tell you right now that the first movie we reviewed, Dr. Sleep, got out of 200 points, 180. So damn near at the top. It's a very, very high score for a movie on this series thus far. Deadly Friend, out of a maximum of 200 points, got 143.5. So, once again, as a charting relatively strong. Thirst got 171 out of 200. And it stains the sand only 0.5 below Deadly Friend. So fucking razor thin. The closest of any of the ones that I've recorded thus far, got 143 points. Which means, looking at this here, I can tell you right now that Dr. Sleep was the top ranking movie. Thirst, second ranking, and then 0.5 split in third. And fourth place, Deadly Friend, marginally above It Stains the Sand Red. So that's the official scores. That's what everyone loves. But if you were watching the movie Clue, it would say, this is maybe how it happened, but it could have also happened like this. Had my scores been included here, had they been in, things might look a little bit different, ladies and gents. Let me tell you for why. Yeah, Dr. Sleep, you covered it. I think, I genuinely think it's a great movie. And The Shining is, like Cole said, on any given day, The Shining or The Thing is like the top of, you know, it's the Mount Everest of the horror movies for me. They don't get much better than that. The fact that Flanagan manages to do everything that he does in the movie, and doesn't really put many foots wrong, is phenomenal. I mean, I don't maybe lean as high on some of the scorings that you guys do for various reasons. Soundtrack, I only give it a 7 because it's mostly riffing off a previously designed score. There is a lot of originality there, but the big bits that give me the goosebumps are the score from The Shining. So I kind of feel like by giving it a really high score there, I'm just praising a score that already exists. So that's maybe where I lean a little bit away from you. But yeah, across the board, I'm pretty high. I gave it 38 points in total. Deadly Friend, I enjoyed it a lot more than I was expecting. However, there were some bits that fell over a little bit for me. I didn't love the score as much as the majority of you guys did. I thought, considering what the guy has done around, I found, out with the end track, which granted did make me smile, I found it relatively bland, so I got a 5. But across the board here, I mean, the high scores are in effects and kills, which both got 7s, and I think that's probably where the movie's strengths lie. Thirst is my jam. I ain't gonna lie about that. I fucking love Park Chan-Wook. I love Thirst, right? Thirst might be as close to the highest score I've given out like on any movie in this series. The only thing that didn't get a 10 were the effects, and I agree with that. The CGI at the end. Once again, though, this is South Korea in 2009. This isn't like Hollywood with effects, so you have to kind of take that into account. Kills also got a 9, so it didn't get the maximum. The rest all got 10s, so got 48 points. It Stains the Sand Red, I come in with a low score out of everyone. I remember liking it a lot more on the first watch, and in the rewatch I found it a bit problematic, not only in its with the lead character, everyone is written pretty terribly. I think there's a needless rape scene in this movie. It does not fit the tone of the movie overall, and it comes out of fucking nowhere, and I kind of feel like I have no context for how long the zombie apocalypse has been going on for. It just feels like people went from 0 to rape really quick. And that to me
and to comment on that also, Duncan, I think it kind of like cheapens the seriousness of the crime with the way they do it in the movie.
Where how they finish it, like how he gets bitten off and all the rest. I don't know. It doesn't. I'm not against it, but it's a weird tonal shift for me in the movie.
Did you notice they were escaped convicts?
I didn't, but I still don't think escaped convicts instantly jump to rape. That might just be like a difference in cultures. Maybe that happens a bit more over there than it happens over here. I can't comment on that. It just does seem like
you Scottish people are too nice.
Wait till you visit. So yeah, like this. I didn't. Once again, when I say I scored at the lowest, I scored at the lowest only by a 0.5. So I'm not like by a 1 point. Sorry, I give it 32. So the majority of the scores are around the 6 mark from me. So I know what you're saying. What you're saying is, how does that affect the scores that aren't the formal scores? Because my points didn't need to be used. Well, guess what? We got some switches, bitches. Using my scores here, first place would go to Thirst, surprisingly enough. But only by a point. Only by a point over Dr. Sleep, which would come in underneath it. So Thirst would have got 219 out of 250. Dr. Sleep would have got 218 out of 250. And bizarrely, even though I've just kicked the shit out of It Stains the Sand Red, guess what? It jumps above as well and goes into third place. It would have been in third place with 175, only a 0.5 above Deadly Friend. There you go. Switcheroo. Wow. It's almost as if my scores were designed to make Lacey hate me. I'm not saying that's why I did it. I am pleading ignorance. So that would have been the final scores there. That's the final scores for the final episode of this series. There will be another episode that will drop a couple of weeks after this, where we actually go down and chart out exactly what those scores meant overall, with the high scoring movie, the low scoring movie, and who is, by default, the best director because of those scores overall. So we take the scores combined of all those movies and bring them in. I want to thank my hosts for the entire series, but more importantly, the hosts that joined me on this episode. You've been an absolute delight to work with. Your names go back into the hat, so back into the draw, not for series 2, but the draw that will happen for series 3 and onwards. So I dare say, unless you're wanting off this crazy train, you're here for life. And you will more likely be back. And I pray that the director you get is a really good one, and the movie that you get is one that you love. That's all I can wish for. That's all I can wish for. You know what that means. You're going to get a director you hate and a movie that you love. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I jinxed it right now. Thank you very much to my host. Thank you very much for checking out this episode. If you're checking it on YouTube, then do the usuals like subscribe, ding the bell, Spotify and Anchor. Answer the question that pops up at the end of the episode. And if this is on the RSS feed, hit subscribe. I've got almost 1,400 episodes of podcasts under the stairs up there, and that's with me taking time off this year. That's with me slowing down. Ain't no slowing down. Yeah, make sure you subscribe to that RSS feed and you get all the good action there. This horror head-to-head series will be back with Volume 2. That will be dropping in less than 2 months from when this episode drops, so keep your eyes peeled for that as well. Ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are, whatever the time zone is and whatever you're up to in this big bad world of ours, please take care of yourselves out there. This is Duncan McLeish broadcasting live from under the stairs, and I am signing off.